Never listen to what Donald Trump actually has to say. Don't worry about that, because he could change his mind constantly. It's not changing his mind. It's a strategic ambiguity. He just ordered 3,000 82nd Airborne paratroopers to come into the region, Expeditionary Force of the Marines, and now they're asking for 10,000 people call up of troops. That's what he's doing. And he gives us the green light to keep striking. So what he says is fodder for the news. The regime has had a long time to plan for this, to prepare for this. It's a huge country. I think that he knows that the Iranian regime is a bad regime that wants to destroy America. I think that he knows that they personally tried to murder him twice at least. But I think he's also a man who has a bigger battle that he's dealing with, and that's China.
Okay, everyone, we are joined by a titan of Israel. I think that's fair to say. Yishai Fleisher, Israel advocate, broadcaster, columnist. He's actually a paratrooper as well in the IDF reserves, and the international spokesperson for the Jewish community in Hebron. Yishai, great to speak to you again. And there's been so many developments happening. You know, it's just changing, not just day to day, but hour to hour. Goodness me, think about where we were just a couple years ago, and now, you know, all the dominoes falling in terms of Israel's adversaries. And now we're dealing with the head of the octopus, as it were, the Iran war. What is your initial take on where we're at the moment, the progress that's being made, and what still needs to happen in your books?
Ali, great to be with you. First thing is, you're right that the things that were impossible to believe only a few years ago are now, we're living it. I'll give you an example. Remember when Iran and Israel were having like a shadow war? It was always a shadow war. Like we were killing their scientists and they were trying to bomb us, but like through their proxies. And it was like taboo to actually fight directly with Iran. So that's over. It's finally out in the open. That by itself is a good thing. Just fighting in the open is a good thing. The other thing that we see now here in Israel is that we're being rocketed, not only by Iran, but one of their proxies, Hezbollah. And I want to tell you that I live in Judea and Samaria. I live in Judea, actually, south of Jerusalem. And here today, there was 2 phone alerts, and the phone alerts are the thing that comes like 5 minutes before the actual alert, unless one of these rockets or drones is shot down beforehand. Here where I live, there are really not so many alarms. Why? Because we're not in a big populated area. So if you shoot a rocket over here, the chances that it's going to fall in some empty lot or even hit Arabs is high. So they aim for the Tel Aviv area, the central metropolis area of Israel. So yesterday, I was down in Petach Tikva, okay, which the British misspelled in English into Petah Tikwa. No, it's Petach Tikva. In any case, so I'm down in Petach Tikva yesterday, and I'm doing some filming, and alarm, followed by siren, followed by running down to the bomb shelter, followed by crazy booms. And within 2 hours I was there was 3 of these things. The last one, I'm going down to the shelter. I was in a kind of business area. The boom was right overhead and huge, and almost knocked me off my feet, crazy. And so the folks that live in so-called Central Israel are much more affected by this rocket barrage. Okay, so it's in the south, in the center. It's also in the north, especially in communities that border Lebanon. That's where Hezbollah has got a strong grip. And here I have a complaint against the state of Israel. We started fighting during the aftermath of the October 7th war. We started fighting also with Hezbollah, famously the beeper operation, where all these beepers went off and blew up in terrorist pockets or vests, whatever. But we didn't finish them off. And so in the last few days, there have been people killed, soldiers and civilians, by Hezbollah rocket fire. Now, people being killed is awful. But what's even more awful is that our northern communities do not have a sense of confidence that they could go back and repatriate those communities, rebuild them. And they're yelling at our government saying, hey, either defend us or evacuate us, but you can't have us trying to establish a life there and living under this threat yet again. So that's the challenging stuff that we're facing. On the bigger, war front,
Just to stop you
we're
for a second before you go to the
go
bigger
ahead,
war front, because I
go
think there'll
ahead.
be some confusion among people that they thought like, hold on one second, I thought Hezbollah was massively scaled back and weakened after the beepers and Operation Nasrallah being killed. So why are they being able to kind of retaliate again like this?
The answer is because Israel's got a bad doctrine of cutting the enemy down to size and teaching them a lesson. And that's a bad attitude. Okay.
Terrible, yeah.
Because they come back strong. They're like
Yeah.
weeds. They're
Yeah.
like cancer. My wife made an example. She said somebody leaves the hospital is like, I got rid of 80% of that cancer. That's not going to work. Now, I'm not talking about the Arabs or the Lebanese or the Muslims. I'm talking about jihadists. I'm talking about Shiite jihadists, Iranian sponsored murderers. I got to tell you something, Ali. This morning, I turned on YouTube just to see what was going on. And, YouTube suggests what it suggests. And suddenly it suggested to me to watch a video made about 10 years
JTV?
ago. I like JTV a lot. I'm a big fan. I think you're doing great work. But in this case, it happened to be Israeli television, and it was a news broadcast from 10 years ago about the terrorism that took place 20 years ago at the Park Hotel on Passover Seder night. And that attack murdered more than 30 people. It was a Hamas attack. And the Israeli GSS, the security services, are like, yeah, we knew exactly who was going to do it. We knew who it was before he even did it. We knew it. But we had a policy of like, hands off, let's try to give peace a chance. And that's what happens when you have progressive liberal policies against really bad guys. They come back at you again. And that's what's happening. And therefore,
Cool.
I heard yesterday the mayors of the north from Metula and Kiryat Shmona yelling, being like, hey, government, you're either going to get rid of this threat,
Yeah.
or you're gonna evacuate us, which is also a sad option, but can be done. Shouldn't be done, but can be done. But don't leave us in this kind of lurch. With
Hezbollah should
regarding
be
to the
evacuated.
what's that?
Hezbollah should be evacuated. Lebanese
Should.
civilians should be evacuated, not Israelis.
That's right, and they should be evacuated to hell.
Yeah.
They should be, and I, the problem is, Ali. You say these things, and they come off being aggressive, and
I've
and yet
graduated past that in my mind
right,
now. I don't see it like that at all.
right.
But I know
I
many
mean,
people do, and it shocks me. And sometimes I have this I see in mainstream media or other people on social media with their kind of progressive views, or not even realizing it's progressive. It's just what they think is the moral position, and I'm
Right.
just like, I think so much of it is actually we're making category errors, thinking that we not firing. You precisely as you said with Iran. Well, we weren't actually in an active war, hot war, so we had peace. No, that's not peace. This Trump saying to Israel after the 12-day war, "Stop it now, stop it." We've got peace. That's not peace. Peace is when the threat is gone, not when there's no active fighting.
You're absolutely right. And what I meant to say is sometimes it's hard to convey in words. You're supposed to hate evil. You're supposed to eradicate evil. And Western minds sometimes can't contemplate that because they think everything is equal out there and that people are essentially good. But that's not really true. There are people who are really evil out there, and they are suppressive, and they use ideologies of religion to suppress their own first and then to attack Israel. And they're really imperialists. They're really power hungry. They're really trying to they really have hate in their heart. And so you really cannot come to terms with them. You have to be Middle Eastern about it and get rid of them and get rid of that threat. And then here's the irony, that is actually liberal, because when you do that, then you give decent people a chance to flourish. You give Lebanon a chance to be a good place. Syria, this place has become so awful. So many people can have a decent life there. But to do that, you got to get rid of evil. And I think that in World War II, there was much more clarity about that. I think that the progressive liberal mindset has penetrated into a lot of people's minds and doesn't allow us to eradicate evil. So it's actually the opposite of liberalism, because you're allowing evil to keep destroying people and keeping people down. So that's the situation vis-a-vis Hezbollah. Vis-a-vis the bigger war, well, I have one piece of information to say, which is never listen to what Donald Trump actually has to say. Don't worry about that because he could change his mind constantly. It's not changing his mind. It's a strategic ambiguity. Therefore, I'm no longer concerned with what he says in that day. It's like watch the hands, right? He just ordered 3,000 82nd Airborne paratroopers to come into the region, a expeditionary force of the Marines, and now they're asking for 10,000 people call up of troops. That's what he's doing. What he says, and he gives us the green light to keep striking. So what he says is just like it's fodder for the news, but it's not actually telling you what's happening on the ground. He's having his strategic ambiguity. That's the way he's working. But what I see is continuing striking against Iranian infrastructure, especially Besiege and IRGC and all the different elements that they have there. But that does not mean that the regime is falling any day now. The regime has had a long time to plan for this, to prepare for this, and it is this is what's so important to understand. It's a huge country, and you could just go into the villages outside of the big cities, and suddenly everything is fine. And so you could hide out. As long as you have guns, you could suppress the people. 30,000, 40,000 people were killed in the protests. Those were the most active, and those taught lessons to everybody else, which is until the moment is ripe, don't go out there. And so it's a process. And my mom said to me something which she, being from the former Soviet Union, she said, listen, a regime doesn't necessarily fall in one day. It could be that this begins a process of which the regime is undermined and eroded, and with time leaves the scene. But the bottom line is, if we think that regime change is imminent, it not necessarily is. The big question is, will the American-Israeli forces try to take control of the financial institutions and the oil and gas institutions that hold up that regime? Obviously, the main thing, you've heard it in the news, it's Kharg Island, Khark,
Yep.
or Kharch, or Kharj. I've heard it every way. I asked the Iranian guy yesterday, he told me Khark. In any case, this little island, which you could see in the videos, is where a lot of the Iranian oil, not the production, but it's getting it on the boats and refining and getting it on the boats, is held. It's a little island in the northeastern part of the Persian Gulf, and taking control of that would be a game changer. But it would be, for the Americans, the so-called boots on the ground. Last thing I have to say, and with that, I'll give you any questions, but I'm saying, just to give you an overview of the war, we have to know that there's a today, we've seen it in the Ukraine war. There is today a tension between high-end arms, high-end military systems, and light, cheap systems that inflict damage. What am I talking about? I'm talking about drones. I'm talking about various kinds of drones. I'm talking about cheap rockets. And these things do damage. And to block them, you have to use very expensive, very high-tech weapons. So low-tech, like in guerrilla warfare, has an advantage over high-tech. High-tech can do great big damage and destroy huge things, but stinging operations, and that is the problem with the Straits of Hormuz. That's the problem with Khark Island, is that it's also an area that's easy to attack. You're undefended over there, and all these drones could come at you and all these rockets. So the Americans and the Israelis have to be ready for a prolonged war. Oh, and finally, that is the way the Iranians also operate. They're happy to go to prolonged warfare, and the West is not happy to go to prolonged warfare. So we've got to all take a collective
By the way,
deep breath.
it's so undermining when the media and everyone's like, well, how long is this going to take? What's happening here? And the economic instability. It's like, that just gives so much power to the enemy.
It does, and it gives power to their strategy.
Yeah.
They have a strategy. It's
the same strategy as Hamas.
Right. Guerrilla warfare, long warfare. All we need to do is survive. We don't care about the loss of people. Not a biggie. And diffuse command structure, which means that if one guy falls down, another guy rises up out of nowhere. and you have to be ready for a prolonged, sustained campaign, which the West usually isn't,
So
but maybe in this case it is. Because now there's another side, though, Ali. There is another side. The other side is that I've heard this said that the American consumer, the American citizen, realizes that if we don't take control of these guys now, they can close the Straits of Hormuz any day. They could terrorize us at any time. So might as well, enter into this conflict. But you're right that the media tries to undermine the strategy of this war. But okay, let's take a deep breath. Understand that I don't listen anymore to when this war is over, or when it's beginning. It's 2/3 done, 1/3 done. I spoke to somebody very high up in Israeli command structure, and he told me the best way to think about it is that it's the end of the beginning, and I can live with that. But we had here in Israel, just so you know, the chief of staff of the army issued a memorandum saying the army is having a hard time keeping up with all these almost 3 years of operations. We just don't have the manpower. Is he saying that for political reasons because he wants to see the ultra orthodox come into the army? Maybe, or I don't know what got to him that he would say such a thing publicly. Now I wouldn't have, but the bottom line is, according to his assessment, or at least his stated assessment, is that there is a challenge to continue fighting in the present levels of call ups that we have. So our reserves are being depleted according to that assessment, and the war goes on. There you go.
So there's a couple of points I want to say to that, and I was going to ask about Trump, and I'll get to Trump in a second. But just because of what you said there about the potential, resources being depleted or whatever, do you think that if the American and Israeli military were told you need to definitively end the threat of Hezbollah, of Hamas, and with Iran, and you need to get this done in a matter of weeks now, do you think they could do that? Is that, particularly with Iran, is such a thing possible?
Oh, it's possible.
So why don't they do it?
It's a cost assessment. It's a cost assessment. It's an assessment of do you want to put boots in the ground? Do you want to have ground operations? Do you want to take over a foreign country? Are you afraid of how that looks? Are you afraid of the UN? There's all these other forces.
It's what we did in World War II, right? And in some ways,
Yeah.
it sounds like it's a more extreme position. Actually, it's the way to end the conflict and create a new future much more quickly. And what would that look like if they were? So you're saying it would look like ground troops? It would look like wide-scale destruction?
Well, I had on an Iran expert, and he recommended that the let's call it the Allies bomb the banks that provide the wherewithal for the IRGC, and take over the oil and gas installations. And that's doable. You land forces there, you land paratroopers there, you land tanks there, and you control and patrol and take it over. But then you have to deal with guerrilla warfare. You have to deal with with the little attacks that they're going to send on you. That's one. Two is you have to you talk about World War II. One of the great battles of World War II was the Battle of the Atlantic Ocean. And at first, for a long time, the Germans had the advantage with their U-boats until it was figured out how to combat those U-boats. And towards the end of the war, shipping was safe relatively. They figured out the wolf pack and other ways they figured out ways to defend against the submarine attacks. The point is that it's a war, it's a battle. You want to control the Straits of Hormuz, so you got to put your ships in there, and they're going to be under attack, and you're going to lose troops, but then you're going to secure it, and with time, it's going to hold. So you need a deep breath. You need to get in there. You can do it. Of course, you can do it. Of course, you could do it. But World War II was a 5-year war. I don't know, 4.5-year war, and you have to be ready to get into a long conflict here.
Right, so that's what you're saying. So there is no 2-week answer if they wanted to.
No.
Right.
No, there's no 2-week answer. There's no way to do that. You tried that. You killed their leadership, but they have many. If they're so famous for their tentacles, then don't expect that you're going to cut them off in one shot. It's a serious business. And you know what, Ollie? Let me flip it. This is what happens when you let bad guys prepare for 47 years. This is what happens when you let them get bigger and bigger and bigger, become financially, their tentacles are in South America and in Lebanon and in Yemen. And you let them expand. So then what do you think? It's like Pesach cleaning. You made a big mess in your house throughout the year. You think Pesach cleaning is going to be easy? It's not. It's not. I can tell you about my room. It's not easy to get rid of all the junk that I've amassed here.
And that's why, just a moment, have you ever heard someone say, I've got no problem with Judaism or Jews, it's Israel I've got a problem with? Well, we've just created our most important documentary yet, called Zionism and Judaism, The False Separation. Have a watch of the trailer, and if you want to watch the full thing, just click on the link below in the video description. This one's important.
I'm not against Judaism, I'm just against Zionism.
It's not Jewish, it's Zionism.
Judaism and Zionism are completely separate.
Judaism is a faith, Israel is a state.
You can be Jewish without being a Zionist.
Zionism and Judaism is totally diametrically opposed.
I'm sure you've heard this before, from protesters, from politicians, from even well-meaning people trying to navigate the Israel-Palestine debate. But I'm here to tell you that this separation is complete nonsense. It's a comfortable lie. The kind of lie that sounds intelligent but collapses the moment you actually open this book, the Torah, the Bible, and study Judaism on its own terms. In this JTV Plus documentary, we're going to tackle this myth head on. We'll actually look inside the Torah and see how in the very first book, Genesis, there's no mention of law or religion. It's all centered on the promise of a specific land to a specific nation. We'll trace how Judaism, not modern politics, but Judaism itself, is structured around one obsessive, relentless, undeniable claim: the land of Israel belongs to the Jews. We'll reveal why the building of a nation in the land of Israel is an indispensable part of the project of Judaism. Why Judaism is not a religion, it's the divine project of a nation in a land. We'll discover how the Torah preemptively answered the colonization accusation that wouldn't fully materialize for another 3,000 years. We'll explore why, if the land is so central, Jews had to spend thousands of years in global exile. We'll unpack what Zionism actually means, and how anti-Zionism doesn't just contradict Israeli policy, it contradicts the fundamental architecture of Judaism itself. For some people, this is going to be uncomfortable viewing, but by the end, we'll prove beyond any reasonable doubt that Judaism and Zionism are inseparable. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.
That's what happens.
And that's why it's completely immoral, the positions of just, well, we need to cease fire, we need to de-escalate. No, de-escalation isn't escalation, actually. Going to war is the de-escalation.
That's right.
I wanted to get your thoughts on Trump, because I agree with you that you shouldn't necessarily read what he says and take it at face value when he says, yeah, we're going to look towards negotiation, especially as it looks like they're falling apart again now. So my question is, do you think Trump really gets the nature of the beast? And my sense is he really does. He understands why this war, fundamentally the ideological problem with this regime, that he's not just saying, oh, well, this threat's going a bit too high now, we need to tamper it down. He understands, he has the same end game in sight that you and I would have. Do you think that that's the case with him, or maybe is it a bit more nuanced than that with him?
I think that he knows that the Iranian regime is a bad regime that wants to destroy America. I think that he knows that they personally tried to murder him twice at least. I think he knows these things. But I think he's also a man who has a bigger battle that he's dealing with, and that's China. China is a real challenge to American hegemony, both in terms of its dollar and in terms of its oil and in terms of technology and AI. And he knows that, in a sense, I think that the Iran war is a type of proxy war. It's a war of signals. Look what we're capable of doing. It's a war of you're not going to get this oil. You're not going to control this oil. The American dollar is still going to reign supreme. America is going to control the world's energy supplies. So I think that there's other things at play here. It happens to be that right now our interests are totally aligned. I don't think that this is all about getting rid of global terror. I think it's also about control of oil and energy. I think it's also about this quiet player, China, and that is part of his math. Uh, there is an amazing aspect to the Trump administration, which I can't be more grateful for, which is that President Trump seems to allow Israel to shine and to show its prowess. This is opposed to, for example, the 90s, where the war in the Gulf War, America told Israel to sit down, sit out of the fight, and now America's saying to Israel, lead the fight.
And
In
by
many
the way,
ways,
that's
Israel's
especially poignant when you consider that there's these growing parts of the MAGA base, so to speak, that are pushing against Israel. So even the more so that he's stood quite resolute in this. That's quite something that's noteworthy.
It is noteworthy, and I agree with you. And also, that's who he is. That's who his father was. He is a man who has made his success with Jews. He's a New Yorker in many ways, and that's a big thing. That's like a big thing. Like, I think a lot of people don't understand that he's a New Yorker, not a Mamdani New Yorker, but a pre-Mamdani New Yorker, and he's grown up with Jews and he succeeded with Jews, and now he has been strengthening the state of Israel and giving Israel a chance to shine. Look, Ali, I got to tell you, my math, the way I do the math, when Israel gets a chance to smash bad guys, to show its prowess on a global stage, to be one of the only fighters out there, it's a good thing. So for me, the war is good. It's a good thing. It's a good thing that there's less bad guys. It's a good thing that Israel is aggressive. I can complain that Israel has not done enough, and I think rightfully so. I'm right to complain that we did not finish off Hamas, that we have not yet finished off Hezbollah, that we have not finished off the Houthis, and we're not finished with the Iranian mullah regime, and I can complain about that. But overall, if I had to give it a grade, the grade would be a good one. The war is good for us, and you could see that there's many Arabs or other peoples around that were like, "Wow, Israel's strong." And that's good. That's the posture that I believe in.
Yes.
And then we also see who the enemies are as well. We see, that Turkey, Egypt, and Pakistan are lining up to make this to make a ceasefire because they don't want to see their patron or their colleague be destroyed.
I've seen some murmurs of Saudi Arabia looking like they might get involved.
Well, the Saudis seem to be, at least from what I'm hearing, the Saudis seem to be pro-war.
Yeah.
But the way the math works in the Middle East is simple. If you got to line up on the side of the winner, okay? Because if you don't, and you lined up on the side of the loser, your enemy's going to come and slaughter you.
Yeah.
That's just Middle East reality. So a Saudi has got to say to himself, is Israel for real? Is America for real? What happens if what happens if Trump loses the midterm elections or the next elections, and now there's AOC, leading in the United States? Like, are they going to be there for me, or are they going to be on the other side? And then the Iranians are going to come and control me and slaughter me and enslave us. So that's the math. And so therefore, in order to win on the side of the math, you got to show that you're here to stay. You're here to go all the way, like you were talking about. There's one more thing, Ali, in the time that we have allotted that I'd like to just mention. We have the holiday of Pesach coming up. And Passover, the essential aspect of Passover is not the acceptance of God. It's not the receiving of the Torah. It's not those more theological things. It's actually about a first step. The first step is liberty. The first step is liberty. God says, I want to liberate you from slavery. Then you go on and you can have the holiday of accepting the Torah, etc. But like the first step towards you being a full-fledged human being that can choose God and can choose goodness and justice is liberty, freedom. There are forces today that are anti-liberty. They are secular Chinese Communist Party. They are into slavery. They want to put us all under some kind of like AI, cell phone. They'll be tracking us everywhere, giving us score points and making sure that we are a little cog in the system where the car will decide exactly where we want to go, where they'll know everything about us. They'll know when we're lying because they'll have some kind of tracking of our heartbeat or whatever it is. They'll always know. They'll be super big brother like we never even imagined. Okay, that's one kind. And then there's the other kind, which is the jihadi version of the same thing, which you are going to submit to jihad, or else women will be submissive. We will all have to submit to this doctrine of a kind of slavery, which is a jihadist control of this world. Those two folks are on the same team. They're the anti-liberty team.
Yeah.
And I think that people don't understand what this war is about. It's about vestiges of liberty. Israel essentially is a country of liberty, and the United States has, awoken the world to the ideas of liberty. And those ideas want to be forgotten and subdued and suppressed. So this war is about the essence of Passover, which is to have human liberty, which leads to human dignity, which leads to choice, which leads to creativity, which leads to flourishing, which leads to being a full-fledged human being. Then you could choose God under that. And so therefore go ahead.
No, go for it.
I'm just saying that this war is bigger than oil, and it's bigger than terrorism. It's about a fundamental global thing.
Yeah.
And when you get older, you start to understand it. And I think that the press does us a great disservice that we're talking about this just in terms of, the small aspects of this war.
Well, this small aspect that I think ties into something I was learning yesterday from Rabbi Manis Friedman. I was listening to a talk that he was giving about Passover, and he was saying that there's also the freedom from essentially the body craves slavery in a sense. Slavery doesn't necessarily mean abuse. It just means I don't have to think. I have no responsibilities. Everything of mine is taken care of. I can just not have to think about that, and I just do what I'm told, and become a zombie basically. And that's what the body craves: not to have to exert, not to have to be creative, take responsibility. The soul, on the other hand, wants to live, to make a difference, to contribute to and essentially at a personal level, Passover is about letting the soul and freeing the body from its slavery and elevating it to the level of the soul, where the soul sort of meshes with the body, and they go out of your personal slavery. And I see that partly linked to precisely what you're saying, when people are so focused on, but what about this slight increase in our gas prices as a result, and we want a quick win, and that's the body talking. That's you've got to think bigger picture. You've got to think what's actually right, what's moral, and get out of that very self-centered thinking. Last question.
Excellent analysis. I love it. Very, 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 very clear. And so we're enslaved sometimes to our own bourgeois, to our own, simple basic needs. And this is a war. We have to, as you said, think bigger, get out of that small way of thinking, or else these forces will come and they will enslave us, as they have enslaved their societies.
Yeah, absolutely. And my last question is, we're talking before about the enslaved mentality, I suspect we can call it that, of thinking we just have to keep going through rounds and rounds of cycles rather than finishing off Hezbollah, finishing off Hamas, mowing the lawn, rather than actually just comprehensively dealing with it once and for all. Is your sense that Netanyahu would want to be dealing with it more comprehensively, but there's something that's restraining him, or that this is his own approach?
Netanyahu was known in the political circles in Israel as a guy who doesn't like to fight, that he doesn't like war, that he's more of an economics guy and a UN guy and that kind of thing. And he, since October 7th, has released a torrent of rage, as it were. In Hebrew, we say the word janana, which means like a craze, It's a slang word, but he has shown an element of a torrent of destruction against enemies, and it's been beautiful. But at the same time, one of Netanyahu's faults, weaknesses, is that he does not finish the enemy in toto. And right from the get-go, we knew that was true. The minute we understood that we understood it 2-3 days into October 7th, we understood that he was not going to do the right thing, which is to take over Gaza and to reverse and walk back the disengagement policy. And you knew that. So you understood that he was going to find some other way to control that land. If it's America, if it's the Board of Peace, which looked like they were Board of Peace from the day one, and what else? And find an Abu Shabaab, like an alternative jihadi group to fight against, like old school CIA stuff, like empower some other group to fight within this place. No, bro, no. It's a 400 square kilometer sandbox on your southwestern border. Control it. Take control of it. You're Israel, okay? You got to hold on to your land and send that signal. Get rid of the bad guys and give prosperity and peace and decency to that piece of land. You can't remote control rule it. You can't create a new PA, okay? It's all failed. And so Netanyahu, when it comes to this, Netanyahu has killed heads of bad guys. It's been beautiful. But when it comes to total victory and control of this land, governance of this land, decency for the people that live there, no, he has not done that. And so therefore there's something seemingly incapable. And the more spiritual and biblical minded amongst us see him as a kind of reincarnation of King Saul, who was the first king of Israel, and he organized the land and many good things, but was unable to finish off the Amalekites and had mercy on them, if you will, and then, was dethroned because of that. And so Netanyahu, and he has said, by the way, Netanyahu, it's interesting, he has said that his favorite character is Saul and his name is Benjamin, which is another interesting thing. So there's a few things. I'm not getting too hippy dippy here. I'm just saying that in terms of personality, he does not seem to really finish the job totally. And there's an immorality. You used the word immorality beforehand. There's an immorality in that because we're basically sending it down to our kids to continue this war. And so, it needs rectification, just like, according to our sources, Mordechai, many years later, was the rectification for King Saul. Mordechai was able to destroy the Amalekites. King Saul was not. So too here, we really need a kind of, we're entering soon into a election cycle, and we'll see if the people of Israel will say that they want more of that. They'll give them the respect, or I suspect there will be definitely some percentage points lost by Netanyahu and the Likud for allowing ourselves to get into this mess, right? For allowing our enemies to build up around us, right? It was the Netanyahu governments that allowed the buildup of jihadism in Gaza. Netanyahu himself voted for the disengagement and passed millions of dollars from Qatar to Hamas himself. And so there'll be a reckoning for that. Leaders are fallible, and we pray for our leadership, and the Bible teaches us to pray for our leaders, for Jewish leaders. We have to pray for them. We're not supposed to curse our leaders, and so my job is not to curse my leader, but to bless Netanyahu with good decisions, with strength. But at the same time, we really have to take policies that get rid of the bad guys and allow for freedom to ring, the bell of freedom to ring throughout the land, Gaza, South Lebanon, Yemen. And by the way, look at all those places. All those places are so suppressed just in terms of life and economy. Look at Gaza, look at South Lebanon, look at Yemen. These places are some of the poorest, most backwards places because of this ideology of slavery and violence and hate. And so it's time to get rid of them. This is the opportunity. Let's not miss it.
Yishai Fleisher, thank you so much for all your insights and wisdom on these matters. Stay safe out there, and Shabbat Shalom.
Ali, thank you very much. Keep up the good work. Shabbat Shalom, and happy Passover. May we really get rid of the leavened chametz this year. Got to get rid of all that. In every
sense.
That's right. And then walk out, and then after we got rid of him, walk towards liberty and towards choosing God. Thank you very much, Ali.
Amen. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Just quickly, we've all heard of heaven, hell, and the afterlife, and at some point, I'm sure you've given it some thought. But the Jewish view is radically different from almost everything you've been taught. And once you hear it, it will change how you understand life itself. Have a watch of the trailer for our new JTV Plus documentary called Heaven, Hell, and the Afterlife, and you can watch the full film right now by clicking the link below in the video description. Across the world, the afterlife is described in simple terms. Heaven above, hell below, the devil waiting to tempt you, and a humanity born in original sin. But Judaism tells a story that is older, deeper, and far more hopeful.
less obsessed with fear, and more rooted in purpose. A story where the soul is not born guilty, but born noble, where the body is not the enemy, but the partner, where the devil isn't God's rival, but his assistant, because Judaism has no second power, where hell exists, but not forever, where heaven exists, but not as the final destination, and where the real end of the human story is resurrection, not escape. Judaism views history as a mission, not a mistake. Other civilizations teach that we are here to earn our way into heaven. Judaism teaches that we are here to bring heaven down to earth. And to understand what happens after we die, we first have to understand why we're here in the first place. In this JTV Plus documentary, we're going to reveal the Jewish vision of life after death. One of the most misunderstood ideas, but if understood correctly, can transform your very understanding of life itself. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.